We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners at Burke Britton Financial Partners. Today's guest is founder and CEO of VOLI, Charlie Crozier. Charlie, welcome to the Finances podcast, mate. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you very much, Jay. Great to be here.
Now, I was thinking back to when we first met, and you've listened to our podcast before, so you know that I'm going to go back into the archives of your world before we start talking about your role with VOLI. But I remember a meeting. We're sitting in this boardroom, and I think, how old are you now?
I'm 25 now.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that it was probably you're in your late teens, and I'm pretty sure your mum and your dad brought you in to just talk to me about things of a financial nature. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I recognised early on that I could see that there's kind of a serial entrepreneur in front of me. So one of the things I'd be interested in talking about with you is where that entrepreneurial spirit was actually founded, and how that's actually brought you to where you are today with the opportunity and the business and the app that you're a part of. So we'll get to VOLI, but let's take a look back in time. Where'd you grow up? Where were you born? Where'd you go to school? What floated your boat when you were a young fella, mate?
Yeah, so I grew up, or I was born in a small country town around half an hour from the South Australian border called Casterton. So Casterton has about 4,000 people in the town, quite remote. We were a sheep farming family, and I think a third or a fourth sheep farming family when I was there. So my dad, grandfather, great-grandfather before him were all sheep farmers on that property. I moved to Geelong, or specifically Freshwater Creek, when I was 11, and went to first Bellbrae and then school up the road at Geelong College for my senior years. I would say that the entrepreneurial element was something that was always quite intriguing to me. Like, I've always been one to try to build things or create things, and now I'm a massive believer of that, that we are born to create, not consume. And I would say a very common reoccurring theme amongst entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs or whatnot is, or even like wannabe founders, is that they say, I was an entrepreneur by accident. Like, it's quite a common phrase. I would say that I was the opposite, and I always wanted to do something, and do something in this space and create something that wasn't there before. And that's what drove me to move, I would say, firstly into the startup space, and then ultimately led to the genesis of VOLI.
So that's a pretty quick path through from growing up on an acreage in Casterton through to going to school to being an entrepreneur. There was something there. There's something there early on in your life, I'm sure, an influence, because most people, when you're a young teenager, you don't even know what the word entrepreneur means. I'm sure there was the potential for you to follow in the footsteps of your family and move into agriculture and farming. Where was the influence in terms of the markets and business? Where was that influence first found or seen, or where did it entice you in your younger years? Yeah,
good point. So a contrast to where, like, on my dad's side being traditionally a farming family, my mum's side also came from the finance industry. So my grandfather was a stockbroker. He introduced me to the concepts of derivatives when I was about 3, I think, using a
When
dollar.
you were 3?
He died when I was about 3, and it's quite honestly, one of the only memories that I have left of him. He explained the concept using a dollar coin and a 5-cent coin, and explaining that, every year that the 5-cent coin is earned off this $1 coin. From the age of about 6 or so, I would ask for shares instead of birthday presents from my grandparents. Age of about 12 or so, I'd call them up trying to, invest $100 that I'd saved up from my birthdays and Christmases, and wanting to put that into shares. And then that was something that stayed, or just grew and grew and grew throughout my later teenage years, and particularly as I left school and was in university. So whilst I did have the humble beginning of like my upbringing of where I was living, I was always motivated by financial markets. I was always really fascinated by the ability to yield from an investment, and so I was always drawn to the investment space. And initially, I would say that I was probably more gravitating towards being a stockbroker than I was initially an entrepreneur. But a few sort of things and life events sort of caused me to pivot once I started on that trajectory, that, you know, made me want to move away from the direct financial industry, and which for me, for where I was working, like in terms of like trading and in terms of investing in a personal capacity, was quite self-fulfilling. I wanted to transition towards something where I could create as much impact as other people, and specifically trying to impact other people, which is what motivates me, which has been what's motivating me for a while, and it's what motivates me now as well.
So again, without sticking too long on the history of you, how, as you were going through high school at Geelong College, obviously there's lots of other influences when you're in your mid to late teens. There's football, there's cricket. How different were you from your peers and the people that you went to school with in terms of what influenced you? Did you play sport? How did you manage all of those other influences with this interest, this want to actually grow and develop something and have ownership in something yourself?
Good question. I would say that I wasn't. I've painted a specific picture of the type of kid, you know, being interested in or getting taught about dividends at the age of 3. But I would say that I was no different to, you know, every other normal school kid. So my weekends I would surf, or during the winter I loved snowboarding. Loved playing cricket, loved playing footy. So did that throughout school. Played at Torquay Football Club, and would often, like a lot of kids do, would play for Torquay in the morning and then play for school in the afternoon, because absolutely loved it and couldn't get enough. But I think that one thing that may have differentiated me, that I was naturally very curious, and I would say that curiosity would go with me regardless of what I was exploring. So if I was looking at footy and I was interested in playing footy, I would be absolutely obsessed with this. And you know, if I was looking in a business sense, or even a school subject, if it was something that I was interested in, that would almost consume me to a point. And if it was something that I wasn't necessarily interested in, I was almost switch off and I'd be completely distant from it. So that's quite similar to how I operate now. If it's something that I'm not motivated by, or I'm not sure why I'm actually engaging in it, I find it really, really difficult to actually build up any level of motivation. But if it's something that intrigues me, something that I'm curious about, something that I can, once I scratch the surface, I see a greater beast at play, or a greater thing at play, I have a tendency to get absolutely consumed by things. So
has that a tendency to be consumed or obsessed with something? It's obviously held you in good stead with some of the things you've done positively. Was there the potential or influence for that to be directed down the wrong path, or have you always found that it's helped you point you in a positive direction?
I would say that in terms of like obsession, I've never gone off the rails or anything like that. Like throughout like college, like I would always be the one trying to, you know, drink the most and win the drinking games and things like that, and stay up the latest. But I would say that that's similar to everything that I do. Like I'm very much an all or nothing person, but in saying that, like I'm quite balanced in that as well. So I wouldn't say that my life now has any degree of balance in it, but I can counter that by, you know, having the ability to switch off, and I'll go fishing for the day. Like I'm going over the next few days, once the weather clears up, like I've just blocked out a day, and regardless whether it's a Monday or a Friday or a Saturday, I'm just gonna go and switch off. But then, you know, I'll get back into it, and the next, you know, Saturday and Sunday, I've just basically blocked out, cleared my schedule, and I'm just going to bury myself in doing some work across the entire weekend. But yeah, I would say that, for the large part, like the obsessiveness has allowed me to find my different niches, and allowed me to develop specific skill sets, and definitely not an expertise, but allowed me to fast track, I would say, my growth, and allowed me to learn things at a lot faster pace than maybe the typical person would, just because once I pick something up, I find it really hard to put it down.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction of you when we first met was, here's a kid, if you don't mind me saying that, because you were younger then, who was extremely curious. And obviously I knew your parents and knew that they had entrepreneurial tendencies as well. So I could see that there's not only some sort of, I was trying to work out how much of that was nature versus nurture. I think that having heard you speak about those tendencies now, that there's a fair bit of that was just ingrained in you, irrespective of the influences from the people around you. I think the combination of those two influences has helped put you on the right path. Now, talking about curiosity, I always sort of ask people about when they made the decision, if they went to further education beyond school, about what the reason for their choice was. Now, you did a bachelor degree in international business at RMIT, if I got that right?
Yeah.
How far out of you graduating did you make the decision that that's what you were going to do?
So when I finished school, the main driver for me of what I wanted to do with my tertiary studies was actually marine biology, for the reason that I was obsessed.
George Costanza.
I was obsessed with the ocean. I love fishing. I love fish. For me, it made a lot of sense to move down that trajectory. The reason that I didn't was because the two universities I could have gone to was James Cook in Cairns or Launceston, and I didn't particularly want to go to Launceston for university, and my grades weren't good enough to get into Cairns. My second option was something business related, and I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, whether it was accounting, whether it was business marketing, whether it was macro finance or something more local. So I quite literally picked the broadest subject that I possibly could, and I couldn't think of anything more broader than international business. And I'm quite happy with the decision in hindsight, because it allowed me to somewhat be a generalist, so I didn't specialise in any one thing. And I say that that's correlated quite well to starting the company and then being CEO, is that I wear a multitude of different hats every day, similar to when I was at university. Although I didn't know it at the time, I would jump across maybe 4 subjects in a different day, and they would range from law to marketing to computing to finance to economics. So I would say that put me in good stead to do what I wanted to do.
So what was it of all of those areas, the generalist areas in international business, what was it that sort of captured your attention the most? What did you enjoy the most, I suppose? What were the things that your curiosity and your tendency to be hyper-focused, what did you gravitate towards the most in the studies? So
during the studies, I was always interested by collaboration. And so I really liked, RMIT has a huge emphasis on group projects and group tasks. Sometimes that can shoot you in the foot if you get paired with other people that aren't so motivated, but if you've got good friends and you hold each other accountable, it can work out for the best. And then there was some of the subjects that I did as part of my electives were delving in the space of entrepreneurship. So in that, it allowed me to explore the basic fundamentals of converting idea to concept, which they're quite close together in the trajectory, but it's probably where the biggest transition actually happens from, whether it's a uni subject or starting a business. A lot of people have an idea and it might make it to the notes in their phone, but the difference between that and actually turning into a concept that you're trying to validate, you're proving, you're teasing out, requires a lot of work. And it's something that I would say 99.9% of all ideas probably never make it out of the phone notes. So I would say that upon reflection again, and I've never really scratched the surface on it or looked back on it, but I would say that was one of the most valuable things for me, is just to, once I did have an idea, was to try to action it and put some time into it and see if I could, anything could eventuate from it.
So this idea of VOLI, so if I go to, you graduated at 18, you went to RMIT, you did 3 or 4 years. How many years did you do at RMIT?
So I did 4 because I diverted in my... I only did 2 subjects in my 3rd year, and I did 2 in my 4th as well. And I was also doing a business internship elective where I was working across 2 companies whilst I was still at university as well.
So at 22, you pop out the other end, and what were you doing? When you popped out, you had a couple of internships. Did they lead you into some roles straight away, or did you think, what am I going to do?
Yeah, so I actually picked up part-time work at a medtech startup when I was in my third year, I believe. And so I was sales manager for a medtech startup distributing.
So if you want to, for the listeners who are not familiar with acronyms or abbreviations, it would be medical technology.
Medical technology.
Yep.
So we were effectively the distributor of different medical technology and specifically defibrillators. So I was instantly gravitated towards that because sudden cardiac arrest is the leading cause of death in Australia. Around 25,000 Australians die from it annually, which is more than, I think, the 3 leading causes of cancer, which is quite astronomical. And then majority of deaths are actually preventable with early implementation of an AED or a defibrillator. I was working in sales there and specifically motivated by a longer term product that was on the roadmap, which was a defib that was roughly the size of an iPhone, and came across the founder of that business and called them up and said, can I work for you? You don't have to pay me. I just want to get involved because I love what you do. Simultaneously, when I was there,
Did he take you up on the offer of working for nothing?
No, so I was getting paid. I was getting paid about $1,000 a month, which would get me through university whilst I was still studying and so forth. But for me, it was just invaluable experience. Whilst I was there, my job was, all I had to do was come in every week and sell 2 defibs, and then that was it. And that would basically get the company through. Instantly as well, I was always looking at, bigger tenders or government contracts or speaking to defence ministers from foreign countries and things like that, and would find my way of getting meetings with them through cold LinkedIn messages and pestering and calls and so forth, and then like different large-scale sales and distribution strategies. So my vision was, I found it quite hard to look at my feet and just do the mundane, and like whilst it was necessary for just paying my wages and paying some of the other guys in the business as well, I found it quite hard to just to look down.
To sit still.
Sit still. That's a good way of putting it. And then I was always drawn to the bigger opportunities, like the big, scary, audacious opportunities. So I was working there for a little bit, and then simultaneously outside my realm, but raised about $1.2 to $1.5 million for the startup that was for one of the products that we were distributing as well. And then that was just off conversations I was having with people. Didn't get anything out of that. Was just bubbling with passion, I would say, and people gravitated towards that to some degree.
I just want to touch on that device because I've seen it. Your mum showed me. I think you might have sent me some details on this, and I probably should have qualified all of this at the very outset that anything we're talking about, obviously I've no financial interest in, but let's talk about it because it's a pretty cool product. For those that aren't, I've talked to my mum about it. I know your mum carries one in her purse everywhere she goes. What's it called again?
So it's called the Cell AED. So it's effectively a defibrillator that's roughly the size of an iPhone. It costs around 1/10 of the price. So the traditional models on the market are anywhere from $2,000 all the way up to $4,000 or $5,000, and they weigh about 2 kilos. This product is quite literally just bigger than an iPhone, weighs a couple hundred grams, and enters the market. I don't know the most recent update, but it's around $400, I think. And I was very motivated by that because one of the main, I think the leading area of where sudden cardiac arrest occurs is actually during the home, and it's quite unreasonable to expect that everyone's going to purchase a $2,000 defib. A lot of people do, which is great, but sit that in your bedside drawer and hopefully never use it. But it's similar to me for a fire extinguisher, in that if a fire extinguisher costs $2,000, a lot of businesses and homes definitely wouldn't have had them. But as soon as you can increase the accessibility to them and reduce the price, it becomes far more obtainable for quite literally everyone to own one. So that was the company that I was initially raising money for, and at the time I didn't even know really what capital raising was, but wasn't really familiar with how
what you were doing. You just happened to be doing it.
I just happened to be doing it. It came quite natural to me as well. I'm going through a similar sort of process for my own company now, which we'll get onto later. But I was raising money for this company just off the back of conversations that I was having, just purely because I was so passionate about what I was working on. My managing director saw a potential talent there, and he came from the banking background. So he was the ex-National Business Development Manager for ComSec, and then worked in Westpac's private bank and managed 20 to 30 of Westpac's biggest private clients, basically. And he also had his own boutique finance company on the side, where they covered some of the things that Burke Britton do in terms of mortgage broking, private finance, debt, specifically for property development, and then also capital raising. And he offered me to come across to him as a consultant, and basically just a fee for service of if these opportunities come up and manage to get some traction anywhere, I'll share in the upside created from that. So I was juggling both these roles whilst I was still finishing my degree for probably the last bit over a year. And then once I completed my degree, I picked those both up full time, and I was effectively working full time in them even whilst I was at university. Somewhat neglected my studies to a degree, which is something I wouldn't recommend. But again, something that I didn't really see the value in trying really hard in university to get the job that I wanted when I already had the job that I wanted. So I just wanted to tick it off. And then I was working throughout both of those businesses for about 6 months, and then ran into the issue of finding out something we were touching on before, that diluted attention gets diluted results. So I was finding that I was doing too many things poorly. I wanted to focus on trying to do one thing well, which at the time, the finance industry or the finance opportunity was something that I gravitated towards. It allowed me to explore more of my interest in the share market. At the time, I was trading cryptocurrency quite heavily as well, so allowed me to delve into that somewhat in my line of work, whilst it wasn't directly correlated to what we were doing. We were talking shop, we were talking financial markets, we were talking equities, we were reading the Financial Review, we were discussing topics that which directly benefited or was directly related to the work I was doing in a personal capacity as well. So took the pivot to focus on finance full time, and was predominantly working throughout property development as debt financiers, and then as well as offering equity or raising equity for these developments, and then raised for a plethora of non-listed companies as well.
How did you find that in comparison? You obviously had a little bit of experience or success in your early capital raising ventures with the defibrillators. How'd you go in the second lot of capital raising? What did you learn from the first lot that you applied to the second lot of capital raising?
So it was a lot harder actually when, despite doing it full time, you've got more attention, you've got more resources towards it. The difference between...
More expectations?
Not necessarily even expectations. I would say that the somewhat pressure of, if I'm having a conversation about something that I'm purely passionate in, as you brought up before, you get there's no financial remuneration for you for anything that we discuss today. It allows the conversations to be much more authentic, opposed to if I'm calling up someone and I'm getting a kicker for it. That's obviously the first thing that I disclose. It changes the nature on how the deal pans out.
Yeah. And
I realized quite quickly that, and additionally as well, you don't want to tap into your network too frequently as well. So that was another thing that I learned from that. So to counter that, I dove quite heavily into feasibilities for property development, and I could focus on that, and I could focus on raising debt. So that was something that I could grind and put in massive hours and make 100 calls a day on the property development front, and a little bit in mortgage broking as well. Because if you try to churn that from an investment front, it never turns out well. So what I found is, whilst I was originally gravitating towards the capital raising front, I found out that was probably what I was spending maybe 5% of my time doing. And then I was really getting busy in the debt side of things, because it was something that you could put a lot more volume of work into doing it. Where if you had a deal and you're trying to raise, and you called up one investor 5 times in a week, that would probably tell you to get stuffed pretty quickly. So
that idea, you've mentioned it a couple of times, collaboration at RMIT, but also the idea of networking and not, how would I describe it, raping and pillaging a network.
Very important.
Relationships are, as you get older, you realise that everything you do puts a mark on who you are and how you're represented in the world. From a networking point of view, you mentioned it, maybe it was before we were off air, but from a networking point of view, what are the key lessons, and we'll get to volley, but the key lessons that you've learned out of the experiences you've had both with RMIT, then in the roles that you've had, particularly around networking and the importance of relationships?
Yeah. So networking and specifically mentorship was something I identified as being incredibly important quite early on. When we were thrown into the first lockdown, whilst I was still at university, I believe I was working both the jobs. Is
this early 2021?
This would have been early 2021.
Yep.
I could no longer. So I'd finished university. I was working the two roles as a business development manager and sales manager. 90% of your time is spent meeting people, which was all of a sudden taken away, and I didn't have a book of existing clients where I could maintain these relationships with, which was really difficult. I'm not sure if anyone could manage to build up a solid book in that time, starting from scratch in that specific industry. So I diverted a bit of my attention to trying to connect with individuals that I thought could help me on my specific career path, and was quite fortunate that Geelong College has got an awesome program called College Connect. And so Mike Howe manages that up, and their whole emphasis is connecting mentors and mentees. So tapping into the collegiate alumni, and I'm sure that a lot of schools would have something similar, and would basically just jump on a call with him once or twice a week, filling in my details, and he would send me a list of names of people that he thought would be beneficial to meet with.
So these people that specifically have said that they would be comfortable being a mentor to a future alumni?
Some were people that he mentioned were in the network that hadn't expressed an interest.
But be worth reaching out to.
Yes, and almost specifically very difficult, I would say, from this group, and I'll explain the backstory on why that was. But through the program, I was connected with a number of different mentors, and I've got quite good relationships with some today. Still have maintained those today. Some local, based in Geelong, some Melbourne, some Singapore, and then some in Canada as well, or one in Canada. And specifically, the Canadian mentor is one that I maintained a weekly or bi-weekly conversation with for about 6 months, and then now we still keep in regular contact as well. And one of his best friends is actually one of our board members. However, he was kicked out of, or asked to leave, Geelong College by Dr. Turner, and then went on to become the senior vice president of the RBC, which is the Royal Bank of Canada, which is, I think, the largest business in Canada, top 10 biggest banks in the world. So I managed to amount a really significant career path, but was quite cheeky when he was in high school. And they sort of did the full 180 where they asked him to leave, and then they came back and they were trying to praise him for all the achievements.
Please endorse us.
Correct. Asking for money and whatnot, which is, I think, pretty standard amongst senior schools. But he was a little bit hesitant to help out the school, I think, to start with, and to throw them a bone. But then after speaking to him once, I think that he put that aside and just saw the passion and excitement that I had. And
can I just pause on that? So he was a reluctant mentor, or potentially reluctant to be involved with the college. But let's go how you actually reached out to him. So I know one of the things that you're obviously passionate about, as am I, about the benefits and importance of mentors. But one of the challenges that a lot of people have is that the people that they see as potential mentors feel out of reach, or feel at a different echelon that really they aren't approachable. So what approach did you take? Did you just cold hard get his phone number and give him a call? Did you send him a message on LinkedIn? What did you do?
For Alex specifically, I sent him a message on LinkedIn. And with mentors, you can use the term quite loosely, I would say. Like, for now, I've got a lot of mentors that I've never met and I'll likely never meet, but due to things such as podcasts, I feel that I can learn a lot from them and apply the lessons and discussions and conversations that they're having, apply them to my own life. And I would consider that mentorship in some degree, although we're not actually having a direct conversation. With the mentors that I got through the program, that was, I think, prompted from a message from school, which helped quite a lot, and then a follow-up from me.
So you sent him a message on LinkedIn.
I sent him
the
a
school followed up. Was it whoever's running the college alumni program reached out to him as well? And
Yeah,
said
I believe so.
You need to talk to Charlie.
I think they asked him a favour, and he obliged. But that's not how I've gone about. That was obviously a massive leg up, and in this instance, specifically, I don't think I would have been able to connect with him. Other approaches that I've had have been from cold messages to reaching out to people and asking for a coffee. And I've tried everything. I've sent huge paragraphs, bios, resumes to people off the bat saying, hey, I'm passionate, I'm hungry, will you mentor me? And every single time we just get blanked. Yeah. No reply.
So what exactly did you do with Alex?
With this one, I can't remember exactly the genesis of it, but I believe it was a matter of trying to get an email address and then trying to book in a half an hour appointment and then just basically capping it at that. So I think that with people that are professionals and specifically like well established, the exact ones that you want for a mentor are quite spooked as soon as you mention that word, because for them that just equates to time commitment.
Yep.
So all you have to do for them is just say, look, I'd love to meet you. We can just do half an hour, and then that's all it is. And then that's how I approached that conversation. And then I capped it off by saying, hey, I've really enjoyed your time.
So did you have a call? Did you have a Zoom?
We had a Zoom. We had a WebEx Zoom, and then met for half an hour. And then
can I get a little bit granular on this one?
Yeah.
So how prepared were you for that Zoom? Did you prep? Did you have questions? How did you approach that 30 minutes of his precious time in terms of making sure it was worth his while, but that you actually gained some benefit out of it? What did you do?
So I think there's preparation that needs to go into every conversation. So, and I do that today. So I still do that today. So I did a fair bit of research about him, his background, the past companies that he's worked at, what he was talking about and what he was passionate about in terms of posting. So I know how to frame the conversation. I also had a clear list of things that I wanted to talk about, and then specifically at the time it was in sense of my career. So I was talking about where I was, where I wanted to get to, and he was awesome in picking it up straight away and helping navigate that. But I would say that it's integral if you do manage to land a conversation like that to do the groundwork, because it's the worst thing possible if I jumped on the call and he said, I'm Alex from RBC, and I said, oh, what's RBC, for example. So you need to respect the mentee, I think, quite a lot.
Do you think you're able to add some value to him? Because I think that one of the challenges in those kind of conversations is that it has the potential to be just a one-way street in terms of sponging information off someone for their time. Well, do you think that, did you go into it thinking, how can I actually make this worth his while?
So he was that far advanced for me that I didn't think that there was anything, and he was also on the other side of the country, so there was probably nothing that I could give him that would be of any value besides the opportunity for him to give back or do something for the next generation. So I've jumped on a number of calls. I met a number of different mentors. Some come up with the approach of, what can you give me? And as recently as last Saturday, had a conversation like that of, what do you want from me? I would state it, and he's like, what do I get in return? And from those conversations, I now move away from. With the specific one with Alex, he basically said, mate, I don't want anything from you. There's probably nothing that you can give from me. All I want from you is that you promise that you'll do the same thing when you're the ability to do so for the next generation as well, which is a very authentic way, I think, to approach it. So he's absolutely gold in this sense.
Yeah, so that's what he got out of it. He
Correct.
got a commitment from you that you would pass it on.
Yeah. So that's all he wanted. And yeah, once I'm in a position to do so, I'll definitely oblige in doing that.
I'm guessing, and maybe preempting the fact that some of those conversations, that willingness to give and put back, influences what you're doing right now. So let's actually bring us fast forward to your current venture.
Yep.
Talk about how you finished up with the employees you were previously, and you started this full-time gig, starting your own your own organisation.
Yeah, sure. So there was actually a small window between the two that I'll just touch on quickly, which is where I was approached by a big data company in America. And at the time, I was supposed to move over there. Long story short, never eventuated. But that was tapping into my my knowledge of the blockchain industry. So prior to that, I was trading at quite a high frequency, waking up at 4 a.m., had different bots and trading algorithms that I would tap into for cryptocurrency. And then as I developed a small name for myself, individuals started approaching me, small businesses, medium businesses, larger businesses, to work with them. And I did some community work with an advisory DAO based in San Francisco, which is called Constellation Network. I won't get too technical with the phrases, but we're effectively an advisory group for the blockchain industry. Additionally, I'd work throughout clients throughout the insurance tech, and then more recently supply chains as well. And then that was an Australian government funded project as part of this supply chain resilience program. But when I was working with the big data company, one of the concepts that was coined that was no one could ever really work out was how to create a social equivalent of a carbon credit. So obviously a carbon credit's awarded when a company or individual removes carbon from the atmosphere. They are rewarded a token for doing so that has some financial value. We were exploring or discussed how can you do the same sort of thing in a social setting. Sounds great on paper. It sounds great.
Sounds great in the notes in your phone.
Correct, in the notes in your phone, but really, really difficult to implement, hence the reason why it's never been done before. And when you boil it down, the main reason that it's difficult to do is that it's really difficult to quantify positive human interaction. And so I became quite, again, tapping back into my early obsessions, I became very obsessed with this space. And the penny dropped for me when I realized the easiest way to reward humans for positive interaction was to reward them for the contribution of time, because that could quite easily be measured. And that basically led to the genesis of VOLI, which is the company that I've now founded. But within having that idea, I basically dropped everything else that I was working on within about 2 weeks and went all in on focusing on this full time.
So this is kind of August of 2022?
It's August 2022. Went all in on this. And I've never looked back, and I'm just as passionate now as I was the day I started. But we've obviously advanced the company quite a bit in a year from that first idea. But
can we talk about the evolution of that over the last 12 months? So again, from notes in a phone that could potentially go nowhere. Obviously, the notes in the phone were founded on all of the experiences that led up to that point. But taking an idea, dropping everything, how do you take that idea to where you are today? So give some context on the scale from where you began to where we are today, and ultimately what you're trying to do now in terms of getting VOLI up and running and fundraising.
There is an unprecedented amount of work that goes from the idea to notes on the phone to mapping things out, and I think that the only thing to cross that chasm is simply time. All you have to do is put in the time. And for me, it was a matter of putting in a few hours on the weekend, getting more interested, doing it after work, and then reaching to a point where it's like, and it probably wasn't something that I would advise doing, because at the time I maybe had a few mock-ups on Canva and a couple pages on Word documents of my thoughts, but it quite quickly...
Can I just qualify that too? Like for those listening, because I hear that concept of time a little bit, but one of the things I think maybe it's you didn't state it, but I think it should be obvious that time with effort, time with energy. I mean, a lot of people will wait for things and wait for the time to expire that something will actually occur, but you were grinding.
Oh no, absolutely. So I had the idea. 2 weeks later, quit my work, and had no stable income or no stable salary anywhere, and was doing this as I would a full-time job and some. So I was working, 8 to 6 p.m. every day during the week, Saturdays and Sundays. And then when I say time, I don't mean time passing. I mean putting in the hours of hard, laborious work to get something off the ground.
I know it's granular, but what is that boring, laborious work that you were doing, putting in time and effort?
So for me, so if you look at any business, and I would say that starting a mobile or a tech company, and specifically a mobile app, is is probably one of the hardest things to do, because there is the distinct barrier of technological implementation. However, if it's any business, regardless of whether it's a clothing brand or you're starting a car cleaning company, the barrier to entry has never been lower. You could get a free Canva subscription, you could make some logos, you could start posting on, you could make an Instagram page, a Facebook page, start getting distribution, tap into some early clients. If I'm trying to start a clothing company, I could have a sample in my hand within 2 weeks from having the first idea. For starting the app, it was a matter of trying to dump down absolutely everything that I could possibly think of that was relevant. I was trying to look at comparative products for inspiration and ideas.
This is essentially a SWOT analysis, like a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
We did that early on. We did that early on, but it wasn't at the genesis. For me, at the genesis, it was a matter of visualization. I'm very much a visual learner, and it was just trying to mock up in a design perspective of, hey, if this was a thing, what would it look like in terms of the mobile app? So for me, that was a matter of quite simply going onto Canva, getting the template of an iPhone, dragging and dropping different squares and buttons and boxes to the screens and saying, hey, this is what the home screen would look like, this is what the reward section will look like, this is what your matching section will look like, and I'll go into the functions of the app in a little bit, but it was a matter of laying it out clear in front of me. And then for me, I found it was a really useful exercise to actually narrate on what I'd designed or what I'd created. So I got an AI app called Otter AI, which basically converts voice to text. And so then my next step was I would have the app in front of me as a visual prompt, and I would start describing what I was seeing on the screen. And so that could be the home button is in the middle of the screen. We've got the reward section. You swipe for this, you scroll down and it matches you with this person and so forth. And then I extrapolated that into a very crude pitch deck, and it's comical to look back on now, considering where the current version's at.
So for the uninitiated, the pitch deck is?
A pitch deck, so for me, like I'd come from the finance capital raising background. I knew that I had to raise money in order to get this thing off the ground, which is another barrier to entry compared to, I would say, the standard business. That was probably going to be a non-negotiable. Like I had some funds saved up. I had some crypto that I was happy to liquidate to live off. At the time, I was forecasting I would only have to do that for about 3 or 4 months. Fast track at 12 months, and I'm still doing it. But we... sorry, what was the
pitch deck?
Pitch deck, yes. So pitch deck was basically a information document that is used for raising capital. And at the time, it was less of a pitch deck, more of a company overview. So basically just a presentation or a brochure. And I was outlining, this is the company's name, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is the product, this is the market size, like trying to understand a very broad range of all the different things that you need to understand. These are the competitors in the space, this is the potential revenue stream and so forth, and trying to build up a basic business case. And then from there, the next step was validation. So I was going out and I was trying to speak with as many people as you possibly can. And I think that that's another really intimidating thing to do, which probably stops the ideas of these great business ventures never reaching out of their phones.
So what were some of those early conversations? So were they capital raising conversations? Was it just explaining, hey, here's what I'm trying to do, what do you think?
Yeah. So before we went out and started raising money, I wanted to know that this was actually going to be something that people wanted. So it started off speaking to my mates, speaking to my family, speaking to small business owners, and then I quite quickly tried to move as high up the chain as we possibly could. And so trying to speak with, founders or C-suite at the highest companies I possibly could. So within a few weeks, we met with Andrew Dillon, who's the CEO of the AFL, and trying to validate the concept with him. And at that point of validation, it was basically just getting feedback of, if this got to fruition, would this be something that you would be interested in pursuing in some degree? So making sure that if we are going to invest all this time, quite early on validating that, hey, this is something that people actually want. So that's, again, a massive chasm for people to cross, because firstly, it's really intimidating to do so. Like, that's the worst the product's ever going to be in hindsight. So there's a lot of holes in the story. It's scary to talk about something that's your own idea that you've had creative input into, and that doesn't necessarily exist yet. Doesn't exist yet. So you're talking about vaporware. It's not hardware. It's not software. It's vaporware. It's nothing at that point. And then people are also very protective of their ideas as well, which is something that I found. So people would say, I've got this great idea for an app, but I don't want to share it with you because you, Jay, you're going to take it. Whereas people don't really realise that you've got a full-time job, you've got a family. I can't imagine any idea probably persuading you to drop everything that you want to do and change career paths, and all of a sudden, you're Jay the app man. So that's another thing that I think people are very protective of is their IP. So it was something that I was, straight away I was trying to have conversations with as many people as I possibly could, because even if they had a greater network than me or more financial backing or whatnot, there was one thing that I could guarantee, and that was that they would be nowhere near as passionate as me. They wouldn't be prepared to put in as much work as me. And at the end of the day, I think that passion beats talent, or passion beats network. So I was quite confident, probably delusionally confident to that point as well. But that was the next step in the process.
At what point did you realise that, or did you make a decision that, listen, I can't do all this myself. Like I can, I can create a pitch deck. I can do Canva. I can have all the ideas, but I need some support. I need some people. Like where did you get involved with your other co-founders and have involvement with other people as a part of this?
Yeah, so it was something that I realised off the bat. So wanting to share the workload, and then bring in complementary skill sets. So it's sort of like the Avengers, if you would, the collaboration of the Avengers. The collaboration of the Avengers is that you have people that have quite literally the good makeup of a team. Is that you have your forward, you have your defender, you have your ruckman, you have your small rover. All of them play a very specific role within the company, and they all complement each other quite well. So it was something that I was striving for straight away. Is that this, in order to get to the degree that we need, this will need a team, and eventually a massive team, hopefully. But for me, I didn't want to rush into just finding anyone, or just going to, my housemate or the next person that could maybe do it. It was really important for me to find people that were equally passionate about what we were working on as well. And we've been quite fortunate that everyone that has joined the company has been someone that's expressed their interest to work on the mission, which is a very fortunate position to be in. But the way that we would go about that was, again, during these conversations of validation quite early on, I'd ring up someone for an introduction. They would ask me, like my co-founder Liam, I would ring him up for an introduction. He would ask what that introduction was for. I would explain the concept, and he basically said, I'm in, I love it, I'm in, whenever you...
When was that first conversation with Liam?
First conversation with Liam was probably about October last year. Prior to that, Nathan Freeman, who's in the founding team, more so as an advisor on brand and on brands. So working with retailers, and he got us into the AFL and influencers and professional athletes and whatnot. A similar sort of conversation. I said, hey, how would this? Called him up and said, hey, can we catch up for a coffee? I want to run this idea past you. And for him, I was discussing how it may potentially work to validate the good that professional athletes and specifically AFL players are doing in the community, because a lot of people don't know, but each AFL player has 20 acts of community involvement that they have to do as part of their contract in their CBA. So I didn't know that until I started working on the case. But obviously, you only see when they've played up at the pub, or they're over in Bali or whatnot. That's all you really see about them. But the professional athletes do an incredible amount for the community. So I was trying to validate that with Nathan. Same sort of thing. He said, mate, I love it. I'm in. What can I do? Similarly with Justin, who's our chair, the chair of our board of advisors and head of strategy. We caught up with him, and at the time, VOLI was probably a week old in terms of, it was not far off the notes in the phone, and caught up with him for coffee and just chatted shop. He had a really interesting background, being general manager of Oakley in Asia Pacific, and then more recently was the senior vice president of Luxottica based in New York, and had an interest in crypto, which is largely what we spoke about. About 6 weeks passed, and we went in to Cotton On, and then one of the board members at Cotton On plays golf with Justin every Wednesday, and Nathan and him got chatting, and Justin came up in conversation because Justin was recently, prior to that as well, was on the board of the Cats. And then the board member from Cotton On called Justin and said, oh, mate, how good is this? I love what the boys are working on. It's fantastic. It's huge. And then he basically called me straight off the mark and said, oh, can you tell me a little bit more about it? I didn't really pick it up when we first chatted. And so we caught up with the coffee the next day, and he said, look, I love it. Like, I want to be involved. I can, give you some advice, or I can be anything from chair of the board of the advisors. And I said, done, you're chair of the board of advisors. And then he's gotten more involved in that since. So it's been quite a fortunate position that I haven't had to beg or pleaded anyone to join the company. In the next stage of hires, there's people that are going to take pretty significant pay cuts to what they're currently on, and it's all that they want to do. So I think that given the cause and the nature of the business, for the good that we can potentially do, is a massive motivator. It's definitely been a motivator in me to stick at it through the time extensions and the difficulties. The underlying nature of the business, that this could quite literally change the fabric of the world, is something that I think, one, gets people to gravitate towards it, but then gets people to stick at it when things don't necessarily go your way as well.
So let's talk specifically about VOLI. Let's talk specifically about what the intent of VOLI is, and what it does, and maybe where it's at in the development stages.
Sure. So as I was saying before, the genesis of VOLI was a concept to reward humans for their positive contribution of their time, fast track 12 months, and VOLI today is an all-in-one platform for doing good. So we classify doing good as anything volunteering, donating, skilled giving, giving blood, or fundraising, and effectively any way that you can create a positive impact on society. At the core of what we're building is a mobile application that does 4 basic functions. So they are match, measure, reward, and recognise. So firstly, we would match an individual with the roles most meaningful to them. For your example, Jay, you have obviously an expertise in finance and financial markets. I imagine that you'd be far more motivated to be a virtual CFO for a non-for-profit 1 hour a month than you would to maybe pick up rubbish off the beach. I'm just using an example. You may love picking up rubbish off the beach, and nothing against that, but you would, one, be more motivated to do so, and the impact that you're actually able to generate for that company is significantly more when you're tapping into your unique skill sets. Secondly, we measure the total good that an individual is doing throughout the team within a company, throughout the company as a whole, council, state, or country if need be. And then specifically, the company element is where we monetize, which I'll come back to. The third point is reward. So we reward those doing good with points similar to Flybuys. There will be redeemable at a number of different brands for product or gift cards. And then finally, the long-term vision is to create a proprietary social feed. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fitness app Strava.
Yep.
What Strava managed to do for creating an online community orientated around fitness is very similar to what we're wanting to recreate for creating an online community orientated around impact. So tapping into the sense of virality and accountability, and just having a centralized place that, no matter who you are, or what good you do, VOLI is a place for you.
So talk about, you mentioned monetizing and the company aspect of it. So practically, I'm wanting to do good in the world. The example you had before of me wanting to contribute or give back, I can register or be part of VOLI, and I can offer my time to a not-for-profit, another small business venture, a young entrepreneur that wants some time from me, and I'll be rewarded for that in social credit, which is that
careful of the word social credit, because there is a social credit system in China, which is not what we're trying to recreate, but it's basically a point system. So similar to that, I think like Flybuys or Qantas points is probably the best way to look at it. So in the instance of you, we have another side of the marketplace, which is we'll have a huge range of different charities to either donate to or volunteer at, which you would have visibility over via list or map view. So you could finish work on the Friday afternoon and say, okay, I'll see what's around potentially to do this Friday afternoon, and we'll have opportunities populated near you, or you could filter that by your skills and interests. With the monetization point, we would onboard an entire workforce to our company. And I will just backtrack a little bit. I'll say that we're rolling out a free volunteer management system and donation portal for non-for-profits to use. So they'll be able to access the application or the people rolling through and list opportunities to, one, gain resources, but then also the opportunity for capital in form of donations. And we're trying to make it as low friction to gain that capital as well. So we obviously don't generate any revenue from that. We're wanting to increase the flexibility in ways that you can give, whether it's reoccurring donations, one-offs, roundups for every time you tap your credit card, or salary sacrifice as well. Eventually, they'll be in later iterations of the product, but they're all on the roadmap in the sort of the medium term. Where we monetize is that we would onboard an organisation to our platform. Say it's NAB, for example. So we'd onboard NAB to our platform. We would match each of those individual NAB employees to the roles most meaningful to them. We would track the total amount of time they're volunteering, donating, what causes they're working with, what United Nations Sustainability Development Goals that they've aligned themselves with. We would aggregate that data and then feed it back to the employer. So then they would be able to communicate that internally, which is massive for driving employee engagement, employee wellbeing, and a bunch of different retention metrics, as well as externally to their consumers and shareholders as well.
Yep. And we be charging NAB for the app or the ability to advertise in their network?
So we would charge NAB for the data effectively. So NAB employees and NAB employees could go and use the product for free. But if NAB wanted to gain visibility on what their entire workforce was doing, then that's where we would charge them, and we would charge a price per consumption model, meaning that we would only charge them for the months that their employees are active, and try to make it as accessible in terms of the pricing as possible. And at the moment, that price is $1 to $5, but we're still fleshing per month per active employee. So we're still fleshing that out, but we are trying to make a solution that's will be accessible for the largest companies in Australia down to a 2 to 5 man team that's wanting to do something for the community, as well as a kid from a local school that's wanting to do something as well, like whether it's trying to improve or gain visibility on what they're doing in the community to apply for a university or a college, or the same thing, like trying to apply for a job and say, hey, like this is what I do over summer. I'm a volunteer lifesaver, and then during the winter months, I'm an umpire of the local footy club as a volunteer. So trying to collate all that information for the user to have visibility on, and then if the company wants visibility on the aggregate, de-identified data. So it won't be JBook did this. It would be male did male this age bracket did XYZ times with 20,000 or 500 or 100 or 50 different people that were involved, then that's when we would generate revenue from that. Yeah.
I was thinking about this. I know we talked briefly before we started recording about some of Peter, my father's involvement on a couple of local charities on their boards, and I think he has, on a couple of our previous podcasts, mentioned or talked about the significant need for some expertise in charities that maybe don't have the ability to actually fund that, have effectively a CFO or a CEO all the time, or a mentor that they can actually make use of. I know Peter does that informally, I suppose, not through an app or anything like that. He donates his time and he helps with sort of the financial accountability and sustainability of some of the charities like Wombat's Wish and Kids Plus. But I mean, again, I'm only spitballing because I'm thinking about it as we go, but that ability for you to create a pathway from or to those organisations that maybe need some support to someone that is not necessarily located in their in their town, but actually connected with some expertise, someone who's wanting to give some time and some maybe some direction on a board, or to me it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, the ability to actually connect, because the connection is the bit that's missing. Like I think, knowing the Geelong community, there is a significant amount of people that want to give. There's a significant amount of people that want to contribute their time. And there's also a significant amount of organisations that are desperate for that kind of support. And if you extrapolate that out of Geelong as a kind of a microcosm of Australia and the world, what's missing is the connection.
100%. And you hit the nail on the head there, Jay. So I think, and there's a lot of strong evidence to support that we're in a connection epidemic, in that humans are actually craving this, but a lot of the current way of life and the technology at our disposal has actually made us more distant and disconnected than ever. And with the instance of trying to introduce causes and charities that require and need the support, there's equal desire amongst people in the community to actually go and do these sort of things and offer their expertise. However, there's nothing to connect the two. So we're basically just trying to pave the roads for people to go and drive their own course. But currently there isn't anything for them to coincide.
Yeah, I think it's reliant on individuals at the moment with their own sweat and time to go out and offer that time to organisations that they're passionate about. Let's talk a little bit about where exactly the app's at and what you're actually where you're at in terms of capital raising, what you need. I suppose there's a bit of a call to action to listeners of how can they, number one, get involved. What support do you need, either in people or in capital terms? How can people get involved? Where can they learn more about what you're doing? Sure.
So we're probably most active at this point on Instagram and LinkedIn. So you can find us on Instagram at voli.now, and then LinkedIn is just VOLI, or if you can't find it through that, my LinkedIn is Charlie Crozier, and you'll be able to find it in my bio. In terms of our priorities right now, and where we're at in the company cycle. So we're halfway through or partway through our first pre-seed capital raise, which is really exciting. So we've managed to secure $325,000 in commitments. We're hoping to raise $500,000 with the remaining $175,000 still on the table. So that's where a lot of my time is going into conversations with those that are wanting to support our vision. Outside of that, from a technology front, we're about 2 months off our pre-product launch, which is really exciting. So we've been lining up different organisations and taking on letters of intent for companies to participate in that. And then as well, building up the charity or the cause side. So if it's causes that are adaptive and open to, potentially tapping into this new talent pool of ways that people can give. And another great example would be a social media manager offering an hour a week or an hour a month to manage the account for a non-for-profit to try to improve their reach and improve their activity. That could be a good way to get involved and work with us in the early days as we flesh out some of the unknowns. And then outside of that as well, I'm trying to speak with as many HR managers specifically as we can, because they're typically the ones that manage the CSR budgets and manage the corporate giving and initiatives for these companies. So I would say that the main priorities for us is, well, not the priorities, we are open to chatting to anyone specifically in the not-for-profit space. But then outside of that, my priorities are to raise money, and then as well to speak to different HR managers, because they'll inevitably be our customer at the end of the day, if you would, and the ones that are the decision makers in whether this is implemented within companies or not.
So again, I'll qualify this again that no financial interest in VOLI at all when we're talking about capital raising. If someone, however, did want to be an investor in VOLI and they wanted to get in touch with you, what do they need to do? What's the minimum level of investment that you take on? Maybe talk to that.
Yeah, so at this round where the minimum investment is $25,000, the process is we obviously have all the pitch decks and IMs ready to go, along with some demo videos. I can be accessed by email, so charlie@voligroup.com, as well as I'm happy to share my phone number as well, if we can put that in.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Show notes, that'd be fantastic. And then half the team, we are, funnily enough, a lot of us are living in Melbourne, but we're all from Geelong originally, so back and forwards up and down the highway. Very open to meeting with people if they're interested in finding out more. Understand that there is inherent risks with investing in a company pre-product, so very tolerant and very I would say generous of our time and trying to mitigate as much of those risks, as well as trying to offer as much time as we possibly can for people that are interested in us. We are having conversations with people that are investing now, obviously, but we're also having conversations with people that may be interested in investing at a later point as well, and trying to build up a list of people that we can go to once we say get the product in market and we've validated the concept and we've started generating revenue. Although hopefully that will be at a high valuation. We're open to all conversations on that front.
What's the from a financial point of view? What's the longer term view? Is it to list or
So the longer term for us, I think that any tech company in our position, I found that acquisition is the most common exit. I think the long-term goal for us would be to be acquired by the likes of like a Meta or an X or previously Twitter, because there is that element of like a large consumer base, as well as the opportunity to pursue more of the impact / CSR / sustainability route, which all these big companies are craving. So there's a really interesting opportunity for us there. Even in saying that, earlier in the week, I had a call with one of the largest private equity firms in Australia, and then they typically buy out venture capitalists, sort of a Series B or C, so probably 7 years advanced than where we are now. So having an exit is something that is a priority to me as well, and not just say investing in something for fun. Like, whilst there is the inherent good that we want to do, we don't want to compromise on the fact that there is a really strong business model and business case that this thing could turn into a great investment as well. So we want to be considered along that of like a fintech company or a prop tech or anything like that in the SaaS space, and don't want to be looked at differently just because we are working for businesses and community to do more good.
So again, if you're a business out there, you're a large corporate, you're a small to medium business, you're an individual who wants to do some good, you potentially think that this is an idea that you'd like to invest in, or you're a charity or a not-for-profit that wants to connect, all the above open to connection with you?
I would say yes. I would say that in terms of timing, I would say that the main three for the time being would be investors, would be charities, and would be companies, specifically companies that have a HR manager. So that's sort of the 50 employee plus companies. They're the real priorities. And then once we have launched the beta product and we'll look to scale, we'll do a large scale consumer launch, which is where absolutely everyone that's interested in giving or can reduce the sort of the minimum employee number down to 5 to 2 is when we'll be open to speaking to the smaller businesses as well. But for now, it's more so the 50 employee plus, the charities, and then the investors as well.
Got it. In terms of launch date of the app, have we got a launch date? Or is it dependent upon your capital raising?
No, so we're steaming on. Like, we could stop raising now and we'll have a product in the market, which adds a bit of security. The timelines, I'm the type of person that says everything should be done yesterday, which is where I clash a little bit with the developers because things tend to take time and delays often happen. So I'm hesitant to give a specific date of when this thing is expected to launch. In terms of rough guesstimates, like at the stage, pending any delays, is late October, early November for our pre-product launch, and then that'll be a very controlled launch with maybe 1 to 5 companies taking on a lot of usability tests and user acceptance testing, and sitting with them quite closely, trying to iron out any of the bugs. But we're expecting our larger sort of commercial launch in around February, March next year, and so that's when we're going to start to really try to crank up the business model and business case for the business. But in the interim, there'll be a lot of work in iteration and fine tuning and ironing out any of the creases.
Very good, mate. Now, I'm mindful of time. You and I could talk for forever. We're about 70 minutes in. I suppose for last thing, in terms of any call to action to any other listeners, we've talked about the priority for you in terms of investors and charities and larger companies. Is there any other call to action, any other thoughts that you want to give to the listeners out there about VOLI and about your passion for this space?
No real call to action. I'll just say that this is something that I'm really unsure of the outcome. Like, it is a massive task that we're taking on. It's sort of like a David versus Goliath sort of instance. So not naive of the risk, but it is something that I'm going to pour my absolute heart into. Like, it's my purpose, and that term gets thrown around as a cliche quite a bit, but I mean that quite authentically, and that there's nothing that I'd rather do with my time. Like, I wake up in the morning and this is the first thing I think of. It's what I think about when I go to sleep and in between when I dream as well. But this is something that we are really passionate about. We truly do believe that there's an opportunity to quite literally change the world with this. And again, that's another cliche, but we do have scope to try to take this thing as big as we possibly can, and we're going to leave no stone unrest on the path to doing so.
Well, congratulations, mate. It's been enjoyable watching the evolution of you. And again, I've only been involved in parts of your life, but it's been awesome to actually see the evolution of you as an individual, the influences that actually brought you to where you are today, and also for anyone out there listening, I'm sure there's motivation in the things that you've spoken about around being disciplined and taking action and grinding on something that you're passionate about, and also the importance of sort of collaboration, relationships, and looking to add value in both directions with relationships that you have with people, give to people, but also being willing to receive good advice and support. So, mate, my hats are off to you and everything that you're doing. I'm sure that we can do a round 2 and a round 3 and talk about this topic or any other topic, whether it be crypto or property. But again, congratulations and thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
No, thanks very much for giving me the platform.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Burke Britton FP, or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britton Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.